Welcome to the Big Sky. I'm Anthony Crescenzo. And what a week for the conference. One of the best quarterbacks in FCS had to be taken out of a game. Bobby Hauck brings winning back to Missoula. 5 teams from our conference are now ranked in the top 25, and 2 players have made Stats FCS Player of the Week. During the number 6 Eagles victory over number 20 Northern Arizona, the Lumberjacks star quarterback Case Cookus left the game clutching his left arm. Is he going to be able to play against Missouri State? Hopefully. In the meantime, NAU is moving forward with Daniel Bridge-Gadd. He may be starting in the Big Sky Missouri Conference Challenge this weekend. For the second time, head coach Bobby Hauck has brought Montana wins. The number 15 Grizzlies are now 2-0 after beating Drake. If Hauck and the Grizz can keep it up, they will take down Western Illinois. The third game of that Big Sky MVFC Challenge is South Dakota at number 11 Weber State. This weekend will define winning conferences in 2018. Like I said before, 5 of our teams are now ranked in the top 25, which is the best rate that we've had in the past 2 years, and that's pretty exciting to watch. The Eags, NAU, Grizz, Weber, and number 23 UC Davis round out those spots. 2 of our friends have made FCS Player of the Week. For the second time in a row, Montana's linebacker Dante Olson has been awarded Defensive Player of the Week, this time for his performance in the win against Drake. Olson had a career-high 16 tackles, including 7 solo, 3.5 for loss, 2 sacks within 3 plays, a forced fumble, and a pass breakup. The other, Weber State's running back, Josh Davis, was recognized as FCS Freshman Player of the Week. In his collegiate debut, Davis carried 23 times for 177 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those 177 yards are the most for a Wildcat in a single game since 2012. Now here's what to look for this weekend in the conference. Friday, Cal Poly hosts Brown. Saturday, UC Davis at Stanford. The Bobcats invite Wagner. College of Idaho in Portland State. The Bengals go to Cal. Southern Utah in Arizona. Eastern is in Eastern State, which is not going to surprise me to be an upset. The Mustangs and Bears will face off, which is going to be a very heavy ground game. Joe Prothro is going to have to pick up a lot of yards against a very stingy Northern Colorado defense. For the Conference Whiparound, I'm Anthony Crescenzo.
The Colonial Athletic Association had another impressive showing this week. Although a couple of top teams are underperforming, some of the underdogs continue to show out. Villanova, Rhode Island, and Maine remain the lone unbeaten teams in the conference. Let's take a look at last week's games. Virginia Tech beat down William & Mary 62-17. Towson got trounced by Wake Forest 51-20. They did get a stellar performance out of quarterback Tom Flacco, brother of CAA alum Joe Flacco, who threw for 345 yards and 3 touchdowns. New Hampshire disappointed once again, losing to Colgate 10-3. Neil O'Connor has the only bright spot, grabbing 10 balls for 111 yards. Delaware shut out Lafayette 37-0. Quarterback Pat Kehoe led the way, throwing for 279 yards and 3 touchdowns. All 3 in the first half. Richmond was able to bounce back and take down Fordham 52-7. Dejon Brissett had 4 catches for 173 yards and a touchdown. Stony Brook blew out Bryant 50-21. Jordan Goins tore it up on the ground, rushing for 146 yards and a touchdown. Rhode Island kept it rolling this week, taking down Albany 45-26. Rams quarterback Jawan Lawson threw for 370 yards and 4 touchdowns. The lone bright spot for the Great Danes was Tyler Carswell, who had a game-high 14 tackles and a fumble recovery. Maine was able to overcome a 21-point first-quarter deficit to beat Western Kentucky 31-28. It was their first win over an FBS opponent since 2013. Two huge wins for Maine so far. Elon Cruz passed Furman 45-7. The Phoenix defense held Furman to 262 total yards and forced 3 turnovers in a big win over a ranked opponent. Villanova crushed Lehigh 31-9. Leading the way was Jarrett McClinton, who had 114 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. And finally, James Madison beat Norfolk State 17-0 in a rain-shortened game that ended after 1 quarter. Ben DiNucci and D'Angelo Amos ran for the Duke's touchdowns. Next week, we have a great slate of games for the CAA. URI heads to UConn for another tough matchup. Richmond hosts St. Francis. Towson travels to Villanova. Delaware takes on Cornell at home. New Hampshire takes their struggles out to Boulder, Colorado. Stony Brook goes to the Bronx to take on Fordham. Elon will look to keep it rolling at William & Mary. James Madison stays home to take on Robert Morris, and Albany looks to bounce back at home against Morgan State. With your CAA Conference Whiparound, I'm Ryan Griffith. Enjoy the games this weekend.
Week 2 was another busy out-of-conference slate in the MEAC as all teams started rounding into midseason form. Number 5 North Carolina A&T improved to 3-0 on the season after they defeated Gardner-Webb 45-6. North Carolina Central notched its first win of the season, 51-14 over St. Augustine's College, while Delaware State lost to St. Francis of Pennsylvania 45-14. Coming up in Week 3, the in-conference schedule will begin for several MEAC teams, while others will look for their first win in out-of-conference matchups. However, one game has already been postponed with the approach of Hurricane Florence toward the region, as Norfolk State's matchup against Liberty has been tentatively postponed until December 1st. Some of the matchups still on the schedule at the moment include Howard facing Savannah State in their first MEAC game of the season, Morgan State traveling to CAA opponent Albany, and North Carolina Central taking on South Carolina State. But the big game of the weekend will include the perennial powerhouse Bethune-Cookman as they look to go 2-1 against FBS foe Florida Atlantic. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm David Hassagen.
Welcome to Week 3. Looking back at Week 2 that saw 4 teams lose to FBS schools along with Missouri State, South Dakota State behind wide receiver Cade Johnson's 4 touchdowns, and Illinois State behind quarterback Brady Davis 5 touchdowns, all winning. Now let's look ahead to this week. There are 9 teams in action, including 1 game against an FBS school and the last 3 games of the Big Sky Missouri Valley Football Conference Challenge Series. Let's start by heading to Indiana State as they travel to Eastern Illinois. The Sycamores will look for their first win of the season as they will count on top running back Jawan Keys and key linebackers Jonas Griffith and Cottrell Moss to control the game. To Southern Illinois, where the Salukis host Southeast Missouri State. They will look to quarterback Sam Straub to continue their offensive outpour, which put up 41 points and 629 total offensive yards last week, while counting on their young defensive line to continue to cause chaos and a few turnovers. Heading to Youngstown State, where Penguin Nation, after a hard-fought battle with FBS West Virginia, look to get their first win of the season as they host Valparaiso. Penguin Nation will look to running backs Timon McCaster and Christian Turner to head their ground and pound offense, while linebacker Armin Delvedade will be calling the signals for their hard-hitting defense. To South Dakota State, where the number 3 Jackrabbits host Arkansas Pine Bluff. The Jackrabbits will look for their quarterback Tyron Christian to keep leading their dangerous offense and have found a new weapon in wide receiver Cade Johnson to go along with their dominating defense led by Christian Roseboom. To Northern Iowa, where the number 18 Panthers travel to FBS Iowa. The Panthers, who look to rebound after a heartbreaking loss on opening week, will count on quarterback Eli Dunn and his top receiver Breely Moore and top running back Trevor Allen to control the ball against an Iowa defense that is among the FBS leaders in scoring defense. Now to North Dakota State, where the number 1 Bison host North Alabama. The Bison will once again look to the 3-headed monster running attack of Dunn, Brooks, and Anderson to control the clock and keep the ball out of a very good Lions offense. Now to the last 3 games in the annual Big Sky Missouri Valley Football Conference Challenge. Let's start by heading to Missouri State, where the Bears host number 20 Northern Arizona. The Bears offense will look to continue their scoring onslaught, coming off their 52-point game behind quarterback Peyton Hustling and defensive standouts Angelo Goodbutt and Darius Joseph. To Western Illinois, where the Leathernecks host number 15 Montana. The Leathernecks will look for their first win of the season as quarterback Sean McGuire and running back Steve McShane look to lead the offense, and defensive lineman Kalen Saunders will head a tough Maine defense. And finally, in the game of the week, number 22 South Dakota travels to number 11 Weber State. Quarterback Austin Simmons looks to continue to put up big numbers as he leads the Missouri Valley Football Conference in passing yards while he throws to his new favorite target, Levi Falk, while linebacker Alex Gray continues to be a force on the field. Weber State had better be on upset alert. Now I'd like to give a big congratulations to co-offensive players of the week, South Dakota quarterback Austin Simmons for throwing 462 yards and 5 TDs, and South Dakota State wide receiver Cade Johnson for tying a school record with 4 touchdown receptions. Defensive Player of the Week, South Dakota defensive end Darren Greenfield, who had 7 tackles, including 3 for losses and 2 sacks. And Special Teams Player of the Week, South Dakota State punter Brady Hale, for averaging 48 yards on 4 punts, including 3 inside the 20-yard line. For the Missouri Valley Football Conference on Football Gameplan's FCS Whiparound, I'm Brian Sullivan.
Central Connecticut exploded out of the gate with 27 points in the first quarter, cruising to an easy win against Lincoln, 55-0. A.J. Hines carried Duquesne to victory against Valpo as the Dukes won a close one, 23-21. The junior running back ran for 137 yards and scored 3 touchdowns. After trailing 19-7 with under 9 minutes remaining, Robert Morris stormed back for their first victory of the season. Jimmy Walker threw for 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns, and the Colonials blocked a late field goal attempt. After falling behind in the first quarter, Bear Fenimore put together 4 consecutive scoring drives as St. Francis beat Delaware State easily, 45-14. Sacred Heart relied on the arm and legs of Kevin Duke in their 30-14 win against Bucknell. The senior quarterback not only threw for a touchdown, but also ran for one. Jordan Meacham also had a stellar day, rushing for 178 yards and a TD. Wagner had no answer for quarterback Eric Dungy as he tied the Syracuse record, throwing for 5 touchdowns, while the Orange handily beat the Seahawks 62-10. It was a close game in the middle of the third quarter until Stony Brook stepped on the gas, defeating Bryant 50-21. Let's look at the matchups this week. 1-1 Bryant hosts 0-1 Marist this week. Marist gave up 369 yards and 4 touchdowns through the air to Georgetown quarterback Gunther Johnson in the 39-14 loss. This has got to have Bryant excited for the possibility of a big game from the talented offensive tandem of Wilson and Constant. While they couldn't get much started against Stony Brook last week, Wilson still threw for 255 yards and 2 TDs. That was following the previous week's 4-touchdown performance by this talented senior. 1-1 Central Connecticut looks to build on the solid Week 2 performance as they take on the Columbia Lions. This is Columbia's first start of the season, who have to start over at quarterback and running back with the losses of Anders Hill and Chris Schroer. With the Blue Devils' offense appearing to have come alive, the Lions will have to rely on their defense, which has its top 6 tacklers returning. 2-1 Duquesne hosts Dayton this week and want to keep their winning streak going. Dayton's loss 40-21 to Southeast Missouri State wasn't as lopsided as it appeared. Dayton was actually leading the Redhawks into the fourth quarter until they fell apart. They can't overlook Dayton's dangerous weapons, Jack Cook and Tucker Yinger. Cook threw for 281 yards last week while throwing for a touchdown and running for one. And Yinger rushed for 115 yards and scored a TD as well. The Dukes would like to see Hines capitalize on a Flyers defense that gave up 285 yards on the ground. 1-1 Robert Morris hosts 1-1 James Madison this week. James Madison only played a little over 1 quarter last week against Norfolk, as the game was called by mutual agreement after a lengthy delay due to lightning. But if that quarter was any sign, Robert Morris could have their hands full with Ben DiNucci, who seems to be as dangerous using his legs as he is using his arms, as he rushed for 67 yards and 1 touchdown in that one. 2-0 Sacred Heart is off this week, but will be back on September 22nd in an NEC matchup with Wagner. 1-1 Wagner travels to play the 1-1 Montana State Bobcats this week. This is the first ever meeting between the schools. Both the Seahawks and the Bobcats are coming off bad losses, with Montana State losing to South Dakota State 45-14. Neither team was able to stop the opponent's passing game. It's imperative for the Seahawks to get Fultz going, as he only had 47 yards in last week's loss to the Orange. It looks like TJ Linta will get the start this week after last week's abysmal performance by Massey. 1-1 St. Francis travels to Richmond to take on the 1-1 Spiders. After losing to Virginia in Week 1, the Spiders exploded offensively to score 52 points in their win against Fordham. Will the Red Flash be able to contain Kevin Johnson, who threw for 2 touchdowns and ran for 2 more? With the high-power ability of Bear Fenimore and the Red Flash offense, this has the potential to be a shootout. This is Scott Glennon with the FCS Whiparound.
Week 2 is in the books, and we had some good, some bad, and some ugly play from the conference. We start with Central Arkansas as they are 1-1 on the year after a win over Murray State, 26-13. Braylon Smith threw for 301 yards in the win. Bearcats fans saw their team win 41-32 over the Panthers. They also saw quarterback Mike Dare complete 50% of his passes in his first career start for the Bearcats. The Wildcats won 41-24 over Angelo State, despite getting outscored 24-3 in the second quarter. Luke Anthony threw for 370 yards in the win. The Cowboys won over the Huskies 51-34. James Tabari had 4 touchdown passes on the day. Week 3 is upon us, and these teams are looking to find themselves in the win column again, as the Stats FCS Game of the Week pits the number 13th ranked Cardinals up against the 16th ranked Cowboys. That game can be seen on ESPN3 at 7. While Lamar takes on Northwestern State on ESPN+, and 18th ranked Central Arkansas takes on Southeastern Louisiana. Those are my 4 games to keep my eye on. As always, it's time for my Twitter question of the week. Do you believe the Cowboys' 2-0 start has to do with being snubbed from the playoffs last season? For the FCS Whiparound, I'm Doug Saravo.
Week 2 in the SWAC saw only 2 teams in the conference come away victorious, as Alcorn State and Arkansas Pine Bluff both won by way of shutouts, as the Braves handled the call 78-0 and Arkansas Pine Bluff defeated Cumberland 55-0. Taking a look at the standings, over in the East, there is an early season 3-way tie at the top between Alcorn State, Alabama A&M, and Alabama State, all sitting at 1-1. Jackson State and Mississippi Valley State round out the bottom of the East. Over to the West, Arkansas Pine Bluff and Texas Southern are both tied for first with 1-1 records. Prairie View A&M, Grambling State, and Southern all sit at 0-2, rounding out the standings in the West. Taking a look at the Week 3 slate for the SWAC Conference, there is 1 conference game and 6 non-conference games on the schedule. Jackson State faces Florida A&M on the road. Alabama State faces number 7 ranked Kennesaw State. Arkansas Pine Bluff plays number 3 ranked South Dakota State. The impressive 0-2 Prairie View A&M Panthers travel to Vegas to take on the UNLV Rebels. And finally, the first conference matchup of the season features Texas Southern and Alcorn State. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm Max Bazzone.